Welcome back to this practical session. And remember what we did last time? We just did the simple regression. And the next thing on our agenda is multiple regression. But then I will prefer to take up a simple regression that has dummy, which actually becomes multiple regression. We'll just make it two variables and then we kickstart from there. So we want to introduce dummy variable at that stage, okay? And dummy variable is basically um, discussed here. So we can use regression model to handle other types of variables that are not continuous in nature. Continuous variables are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to whatever number. When you count interest rate, it is continuous. When you count GDP, is continuous. When you count export, is continuous. It ranges from almost 1 to infinity. Okay. However, there are some other variables that are known as categorical variables, or what some call indicator variables. They are also called qualitative variables. Qualitative like number, red, yellow, blue, and then is also called dummy variables. Now, dummy variable usually indicates the presence or absence of a given quality in question or attributes, such as if you ask people question to answer, maybe in a questionnaire, and they have to indicate yes or no. So you can decide to group the people that answered yes and those that answered no, or male or female in terms of gender, or white, white or black. You can also consider pre or post an intervention. If government has introduced an intervention, maybe like a project to alleviate poverty, and you want to examine the situation of the people before that intervention or after that intervention, or a policy option that has been introduced. Um, these are basically nominal scale variables. Okay, now we can quantify such attributes by constructing what is basically an artificial quantitative variable that takes on values of 1 or 0, where 1 indicates the presence or possession of such attributes and 0 indicates otherwise. A typical example is what is stated here, where we are looking at gender, and then you want to do analysis, and you've asked people to indicate their gender. Some said, okay, I'm male, others said female, and you decide to assign 1 for all the people who answered they are male, or female to all the people who answered 0 to all the people who answered that they are female. But note that this is arbitrary. There's no hard rule about it. As a researcher, you decide who to assign 1 or 0 to. But I give you a hint that will guide you. Um, it depends on what you want to find out. If, for instance, we are doing this study and the interest is on household, I'm looking at a study on household poverty, and I've asked the respondents question: who is the head of your household? A male-headed household or female-headed household? If I'm interested in finding out if being a male-headed household has effects on poverty, then I will assign 1 to male. If I'm rather interested in finding out if being a female-headed household, if a female-headed household has effects on poverty, I will assign 1 to female-headed household. So you are at liberty to decide what to do. It's not a straitjacket. If you understand how to play around dummy, is something you actually fit it the way you want it to be, depending on your objective. For instance, look at the second example here. Poor HH. This HH stands for household. Poor household. 1 if below household, if below poverty level. So I'm looking at those who are poor here. 1 if below poverty level, 0 if otherwise. Otherwise could mean the people are above poverty level or they are just at poverty level. So here the interest could be to find out the effect of being below poverty level on on certain factor. For instance, you want to check you know whether a household being living below poverty level affect their participation in political decisions. Okay, in that case I will assign below poverty to be 1, so that when my result comes out, it's easy to interpret that if it's significant, then I could say that the households that are below poverty level, have still contribute to political decisions in the community. Okay, so you decide on how to assign that. You may want to read further materials on dummy variables, and they could be very interesting. And it can actually be used for more complicated cases where you are looking at about 3 countries or 4 countries participating in a study or in an intervention, and you want to know which country and how it affects that. Once your dummy variable begins to exceed like 2 options this way, getting to 3, there is something we call a kind of base value. That is a bit beyond the scope of this training for now, but it's important you know it in case you see it somewhere in a material. So variables that assume the values of 0 or 1 are referred to as dummy variable basically. Now we're going to look at an example in this study, and the example we want to look at is the model we are seeing here now, a multiple regression with dummy variable. In this case, we have only one dependent variable, a plain variable, and 2 independent variables. One is import, whereas the other one is dummy. Okay, now this dummy is used here to capture the policy intervention called SAP in Nigeria at a particular time. SAP stands for Structural Adjustment Program. It was introduced by Nigerian government at certain time in the nation. And so this study could be a kind of review to find out whether pre-SAP, the difference between what happened between pre-SAP and then post-SAP. Okay, so in that case, the pre-SAP could be assigned 1 and post-SAP assigned 0. You can also alter it depending on what you want to do. If you want to know whether SAP has actually shown effects on the economy, in that case, I will quickly use post-SAP as 1 and then pre-SAP as 0. So it's something you should be able to play around with. So in this case, if I do this analysis, I'm trying to find out if the introduction of SAP has shown any effect or caused what people call structural change on GDP in this context. Okay, so let's quickly get to our Excel set. Now look at the Excel file here. I have GDP, I have import, I have dummy. Now the data started from 1970 and continues. SAP was introduced somewhere around 1986, right? If you know your basic economics or you check the history of Nigeria economy, you will still find out somewhere around 1986. So now all the periods before SAP, 1985 till 1970, are assigned 0. Now, but the period after SAP, or from the period of SAP 1986 till 2012, are assigned a value of 1. So like I explained earlier, in this case, this study is interested in knowing if introduction of SAP has shown any structural change or any effect on the national income, GDP. Okay, so let's quickly get to Eviews. Remember the way we operated. you quickly open your Eviews and we get our data there. Now, you remember I had to close this and then I go to File. Okay, we get to File, Open, and Work File. Alternatively, Control N opens that dialog box quickly, and we enter the year, the start year. Other things are okay. The start year 1970 to 2012. Then we click OK. It creates that our worksheet for us. You remember how we got to this point last time. Now, I deliberately decided to repeat this to refresh your mind because we want you to internalize this study. We want you to become the best you can be. We want you to be able to do an independent study, after this training. Now, we go and pick that our Excel file. We pick it from GDP, okay? And then together with the dummy is copied now, right? You remember what I said earlier? Once you see this white stuff looking like ants running around your data, then activation copy is activated. So how do we open our spreadsheet? You still remember? You go to quick, right? Yeah. Empty group edit series. Beautiful. Now, remember, if you paste it now, you'll be battling to find a way of including your variable name. So remember the trick. I say you push it a little forward, okay, and then you see the space where you right click and drop your data, or Ctrl V to drop your data with the variable name. That's beautiful, and that has given us our dummy, our GDP, our exports, okay, our import rather. So these are the things we want to quickly use to do this analysis. And what are we trying to do? We quickly run. Remember the method? I'm assuming, but I just want to be sure I'm not too fast. I need you to follow. How do we do our basic estimation? The same method we use for simple regression. You go to quick, right? Then estimate equation. Okay, beautiful. What do? You type your GDP, that's your dependent variable. You give a space. You type C, that's the intercept. You give a space. You type the variable the way you want it to be arranged in your result. And in this case, we want the import to come first. So we type import and followed by what? Our dummy. And remember what our dummy is. This dummy is here used to represent what? SAP. So somebody could have as well renamed this dummy SAP. Okay. Now, so what do? We're using OLS. We are not changing our sample size. And so we click OK. It gives us a very beautiful result. In this case, we now have more than one variable in our independent group. That makes it multiple regression. Okay, so we have the GDP, and then we have imports and dummy, and then we also have the coefficient of the estimates. This value here, 5,319.411 is the estimate of our intercepts, whereas import is represented by this value, that is the estimate of import, and then the dummy is represented by this value. Okay, now we have other things that are there. We'll still do interpretation of this result, but I just needed you to learn this. Okay, now we're going to stop here, and I'll show you something quickly. If I don't want to, let me close this result and take it with another format. Now, I want to quickly open another method of opening the dialog box for estimation. Remember when I said if you want to get your data again, you highlight the variables in question, right? Then you right click on that variable. If you right click on it, you can open as group to see the variables you are working with. If I say yes, open, we see the variable. Okay, let me minimize this. But instead of opening that, I can ask it to open it as equation. Open as equation. It quickly imports everything for me. Now, but sometimes the arrangement may not be what you want. If it is not what you want, you quickly drag them, okay, to where you want them to be. I can drag my C to come before, after GDP, and then that is fine. So you can quickly rearrange. Why this is important is that sometimes you may have a lot of variables, listed in your work file that you want to use, and you may be having challenge to remember how to type each correctly. Even though this system at this stage, Eviews has done a lot of job in improving on the software, such that when you begin to type, it can show you suggestions to just accept that this is fine. Okay, so now what do? You just click OK. It gives us the result. So we want to keep this one here. This shows you how you can use dummy variable in your analysis at any point. Okay, if this is not significant, it shows there is no, the dummy is not significant. It shows there is no structural change. It has cost. SAP has cost on GDP. If it is significant, it shows that since after SAP was introduced, there has been a change on the performance of the economy. So, like I said earlier, I can quickly change the name of this dummy to answer SAP, since that is what is represented. But if I do it in my research, I should be able to see rename. I can rename this, and this is what it is, so I'll rename it SAP. But if I rename it SAP, I should be able to indicate in my study that SAP is a dummy variable, and then I will define it as stated here, that in this case, this becomes SAP equal to 1 for post-SAP era and 0 for pre-SAP era, okay, in your variable definition. So if you run it, it gives you the same result we obtained earlier. So these are some things: GDP, C, wow, GDP, right? GDP, okay, C, import, okay, and then here you now have SAP, and do it. Now, if you still remember the value we got earlier, it's just the same thing. So these are small things you can add to your work to make it beautiful. Thank you very much for joining us in this particular class. We will take it up in the next class. We're expanding, we are growing gradually. Thank you.